In the year of our Lord 1912, the quiet New England town of Havenbrook was known for two things: its pristine village green and the strange, impenetrable silence of the Dreadmoor family manor. The Dreadmoors had lived on the edge of town for 3 generations, a family of immense wealth and influence. From the outside, their lives were a perfect postcard of Gilded Age prosperity. Their portraits hung in the town hall. Their name was on the deed of every major building. They were the very picture of respectability. But there was a dark, unspoken truth that everyone in Havenbrook knew, but no one dared to acknowledge. The Dreadmoors never spoke, not a single word. Oh, they communicated in a fashion. In public, they would use precise, scripted gestures or pass small, handwritten notes to their associates. At home, their servants were instructed to only answer questions in writing, and any sound above a whisper was a punishable offense. They hosted elaborate, silent dinner parties, where the only sound was the clinking of silverware. The silence of the Dreadmoor Manor wasn't a family quirk. It was a rule, a terrifying, unbreakable code passed down from one generation to the next. For over a century, the town simply accepted it. The Dreadmoor's odd habit, they called it with a nervous laugh. But a habit is something you can break. A silence so absolute, so profound, so deeply ingrained, is not a habit. It is a prison, and prisons are built to hold a secret. The truth of the Dreadmoor silence was buried in a place no one ever thought to look: a dusty, leather-bound family history journal, discovered in 1998 in a forgotten corner of the Havenbrook Historical Society's archives. It was written in a cramped, tiny hand, the pages filled with the chilling confessions of a man driven to madness by a secret too terrible to speak. The journal described a family burdened by a curse, a generational punishment for a horrifying crime so unspeakable, it was forced into silence. This is not a ghost story. This is not about the supernatural. This is about a human horror so profound, it infected a family line for 100 years, twisting their minds and turning their words to dust. This is the story of the family who never spoke. Before we delve into the dark secret that poisoned the Dreadmoor clan, I want to ask you a question. What's the most unsettling story you've ever heard from your own town's history? Drop a comment below and share it. And if this story has you hooked, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It helps us dig up more hidden histories that they don't want you to know about. Now, to understand the silence, we have to go back to the beginning, to a cold autumn night in 1812, and a crime that would forever seal the lips of an entire family. To understand the Dreadmoor silence, we have to travel back in time, to a different era where a family's name was a fragile thing, more valuable than gold. The family patriarch was a man named Silas Dreadmoor. In 1812, Silas was a man of power and standing, a successful merchant, the owner of a sprawling estate, and a pillar of the Havenbrook community. He and his wife, Abigail, were seen as the town's golden couple. They hosted lavish parties. Their clothes were the finest from London. Their futures, it seemed, were boundless. But behind the locked doors of the Dreadmoor Manor, a different kind of reality was unfolding, a quiet desperation that ate at Silas's soul. Abigail, after 5 years of marriage, was unable to bear a child, and Silas knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that a family without an heir was not a family at all. It was a name awaiting its extinction. Their lineage, their legacy, all the power they had amassed, was meaningless without a son to inherit it. The pressure from his father, his business partners, and the very society he had built his life around was immense. A man without an heir was not a man to be respected. He was an empty vessel. And Silas Dreadmoor was a man who prized respect above all else. He was a man who would do anything, absolutely anything, to avoid the public humiliation of having his family name die out with him. In late September of 1812, a miracle arrived, not in his own bed, but in the cottage of a young seamstress who worked for his wife. Her name was Elizabeth Thorne. She was a quiet, pretty girl, recently widowed, with no family to speak of. She had just given birth to a healthy baby boy, a child she named John. The boy was perfect, strong, healthy, with a mop of dark hair and a fierce cry. A child Silas knew in his gut was the heir he had been praying for. A terrible plan began to form in Silas' mind. A plan so monstrous it could never be spoken of. A secret so vile it would poison an entire family for generations. He would not just take the child. He would make sure no one could ever question his claim. He would make sure no one could ever speak of the truth. He would make sure that the only witness was a dead one. On the night of October 23, 1812, a terrible storm rolled through Havenbrook. The wind howled like a living thing, and rain lashed against the windows of the Dreadmoor Manor. In the silence of his study, Silas Dreadmoor wrote a single chilling entry in his private journal, an entry that would only be discovered nearly 2 centuries later. The night proved a dark gift, the wind a convenient cover. The deed is done. The boy is ours. The witness, a soul to be forgotten. From this day forward, no word of this night shall be spoken, not to ourselves, nor to our children, nor to our children's children. The truth is a poison that must be contained, forever. Let our silence be the seal upon our legacy. That night, under the cover of the storm, Silas Dreadmoor had gone to the cottage of Elizabeth Thorne. He took her sleeping child, the boy named John, and replaced him with the body of a stillborn infant he had obtained from a midwife in a neighboring town. He then did something so vile, so chillingly cold, that the town's own historical records cannot bring themselves to record it fully. He made sure the secret died with Elizabeth Thorne, and it did. The official records from 1812 simply state that Elizabeth Thorne's cottage was swept away in a terrible flood, a tragic but natural event. The town mourned her for a week, and then she was forgotten. But Silas Dreadmoor was never able to forget. He brought the child, the boy he now called his son, back to his manor. He presented the child to his wife Abigail, who, in her desperation for an heir, accepted the boy with a quiet, tear-soaked relief. The town celebrated the birth of the Dreadmoor heir, a miracle sent from God. But Silas knew the truth, and in that truth lay the curse. Silas Dreadmoor was a man who prized respect, but he was also a man who had committed an unforgivable sin. The crime was now a permanent stain on his soul. He had sworn in his journal that the truth would never be spoken. But a vow is a difficult thing to enforce over a lifetime. He became obsessed. He feared that his wife would one day break down and confess. He feared that the boy he had stolen would one day look at him with knowing eyes. He feared that in his own sleep, he would speak the words he had forced himself to forget. So, he made the vow an order, a rule, a family code. He ordered Abigail and the servants to communicate only with written notes. He demanded that no sound ever be made in his presence. The child, the stolen boy, was raised in this silence. He was not taught to speak. He was taught to point, to gesture, to write. The Dreadmoor silence wasn't a punishment for a crime against a stranger. It was a punishment for a crime committed against a family. It was a seal on the lie that gave them their legacy. For years, as the boy grew, Silas continued to write in his journal, chronicling the terror of his own secret and the madness that was now spreading to his entire family. Because a secret that big is a living thing, and sometimes it finds a way to speak, even without a voice. A century passed. The original lie, buried beneath generations of silence, had become the defining trait of the Dreadmoor family. The stolen boy, now an old man, had fathered children. His children, in turn, had children of their own. Each one of them, born into immense wealth, was raised in the same soundless prison. They learned to communicate with a terrifying choreographed precision, their faces blank of emotion, their hands moving in a language only they understood. But not all secrets stay buried, and sometimes the truth finds a way to reveal itself, one terrifying clue at a time. In 1898, a young archivist named Eleanor Vance was hired by the Havenbrook Historical Society to organize their immense collection of town records. Eleanor was a curious and meticulous woman the kind of person who saw a story in every ledger and a truth in every forgotten deed. It didn't take her long to notice the Dreadmoors. The family was everywhere in the records, yet their story was a blank page. The town's official history simply called them a family of quiet means. Eleanor began to dig. She found correspondence from town leaders praising the Dreadmoors' benevolence, but never mentioning a single spoken conversation. She found old photographs where the family's mouths were always either turned away from the camera or obscured by a hand or a piece of clothing. It was a bizarre, consistent anomaly. Her first real clue was a letter from a former town councilman, written in 1845. The letter mentioned a dispute with the Dreadmoor patriarch of that time. The councilman wrote, "I attempted to speak with him, but he simply looked at me with those cold, dead eyes." He slid a note across the table that read, "Some truths are best left unspoken. I have never been more unsettled in my life." Eleanor became obsessed. She spent her nights poring over documents, drawing a disturbing conclusion. The Dreadmoor silence wasn't a choice. It was a compulsion, a symptom of a deeper, darker secret. She went to the Havenbrook Library and found a rare first edition of the town's founding history, a book commissioned by Silas Dreadmoor himself. In the book, she found a single hand-drawn map. It showed the old town layout, but with an area on the outskirts marked with an X, and a note in a faded, shaky hand. The Thorne Cottage, lost to the flood. It was the first mention of the Thorne family she had ever found in the town's records. It was as if they had never existed. And Eleanor, her heart now pounding in her chest, knew this was where the story began. She had just one more place to check, a long-lost journal, rumored to be in the Dreadmoor family's possession. But she wasn't the only one who had discovered something. Eleanor was leaving the library late one evening, her mind reeling with these new discoveries, when she was approached by a young woman. The woman was Abigail Dreadmoor, the granddaughter of the current patriarch. She was a beautiful girl with a porcelain face and a calm, unnerving silence. She didn't speak. Instead, she extended her hand and showed Eleanor a small, neatly folded note. Eleanor unfolded the paper and read the single line, written in a beautiful, elegant script. "Some things are best not to be found." Eleanor looked up, but Abigail was already gone, her steps soundless on the cobblestone street. The message was a cold, direct warning from the family that never spoke. The secret was still alive. It was still being guarded. And Eleanor Vance, the curious archivist, knew that she was now dangerously close to a truth that was meant to stay silent. The warning from the Dreadmoor girl should have been enough. Any sane person would have walked away, but Eleanor Vance was not a sane person. She was a scholar on the verge of a world-changing discovery, a woman obsessed with a truth she knew was buried deep beneath a century of silence. The warning did not frighten her. It fueled her. It was proof that the secret was real, that it was alive, and that it was being guarded. Eleanor began her frantic search for the journal. She spent weeks in the musty basements of the town hall, poring over old ledgers and tax records. She followed a rumor, a tiny footnote in a long-forgotten inventory list from the Dreadmoor estate sale in 1867. A private journal was listed, but its final destination was noted as unknown. Undeterred, Eleanor continued her hunt, driven by a growing, frantic obsession that began to consume her health. She developed a persistent cough, her hands began to shake, and she found it difficult to sleep, haunted by the images of the silent family. In her journal, she wrote that she felt like she was being watched, that the coldness of the Dreadmoor silence had finally seeped into her own soul. In October of 1898, her relentless search finally led to an old retired town clerk who had worked for the Dreadmoors for decades. The old man, nearly blind and living in a dusty, cluttered cottage, was a man of few words. Eleanor pressed him, showing him the Dreadmoors' history, pointing to the blank spots, the missing stories. She asked him about Silas Dreadmoor's lost journal. The old man trembled. He told her a terrifying, hushed story. He said the journal had not been sold. It had been sealed away in a basement vault in the family bank, an unspoken tomb for an unspoken truth. It was a place where only a Dreadmoor could enter, and then he handed her a small leather-bound volume. It was a copy of the town's FO, founding documents, commissioned by the Dreadmoors and filled with their own family notations. Inside, on a blank page at the very end, was a tiny hand-drawn map. It showed the location of the bank vault. It was a silent invitation. It was a trap. Eleanor went to the bank the next day. She used her position as an archivist to claim she was verifying old records. She found the vault, hidden behind a false wall, and managed to convince the old bank teller to let her in, just for a moment, to check for a document she claimed was missing. Inside, on a solitary shelf, she saw it. The Dreadmoor Journal. It was bound in black leather, its pages sealed with a wax stamp. The seal was unbroken, but as her hand reached for the book, a voice echoed in the cold stone vault. "Don't touch it." Eleanor turned. It was Abigail Dreadmoor. She was standing at the entrance, her face devoid of emotion. She was holding a small silver-plated pistol. She didn't speak. She just gestured toward the journal. Eleanor stepped back, her hands raised. Abigail pointed the pistol, her hand steady, her eyes fixed on the journal. She then lowered the pistol and pointed it at Eleanor's heart. "Some things are meant to stay silent," Abigail whispered, her voice a thin, raspy sound like a dying fire. Eleanor didn't know how the Dreadmoor girl had found her. She didn't know why she was holding a gun. She just knew that she was standing on the precipice of a terrible, silent truth. She pleaded with Abigail, her voice breaking. "The sickness," she said, her voice a frantic whisper. "The curse. You're trying to keep it a secret. I can help you." Abigail's face remained a blank mask. She simply shook her head and lowered the pistol. But as she did so, she extended her other hand. In it was a small cloth-wrapped object. She revealed it. It was a stillborn infant, perfectly preserved. Its face a groats, founding documents, commissioned by the Dreadmoors and filled with their own family notations. Inside, on a blank page at the very end, was a tiny hand-drawn map. It showed the location of the bank vault. It was a silent invitation. It was a trap. Eleanor went to the bank the next day. She used her position as an archivist to claim she was verifying old records. She found the vault, hidden behind a false wall, and managed to convince the old bank teller to let her in, just for a moment, to check for a document she claimed was missing. Inside, on a solitary shelf, she saw it. The Dreadmoor Journal. It was bound in black leather, its pages sealed with a wax stamp. The seal was unbroken, but as her hand reached for the book, a voice echoed in the cold stone vault. "Don't touch it." Eleanor turned. It was Abigail Dreadmoor. She was standing at the entrance, her face devoid of emotion. She was holding a small silver-plated pistol. She didn't speak. She just gestured toward the journal. Eleanor stepped back, her hands raised. Abigail pointed the pistol, her hand steady, her eyes fixed on the journal. She then lowered the pistol and pointed it at Eleanor's heart. "Some things are meant to stay silent," Abigail whispered, her voice a thin, raspy sound like a dying fire. Eleanor didn't know how the Dreadmoor girl had found her. She didn't know why she was holding a gun. She just knew that she was standing on the precipice of a terrible, silent truth. She pleaded with Abigail, her voice breaking. "The sickness," she said, her voice a frantic whisper. "The curse. You're trying to keep it a secret. I can help you." Abigail's face remained a blank mask. She simply shook her head and lowered the pistol. But as she did so, she extended her other hand. In it was a small cloth-wrapped object. She revealed it. It was a stillborn infant, perfectly preserved. Its face a grotesque mirror of a terrible truth. Eleanor gasped, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. The stillborn infant. It wasn't just a part of the past. It was a recurring tragedy. It was the Dreadmoor curse, a punishment passed down through the generations, a constant reminder of the sin that had been committed. Abigail didn't say another word. She simply stared at Eleanor with those cold, empty eyes, then turned and walked away, leaving the stillborn infant on the floor of the bank vault. Eleanor Vance died 3 days later. The official cause was a sudden rapid-onset pneumonia. Her journal, a chronicle of her obsession with the Dreadmoor family, was found open on her desk. The last entry was a single word, written in a shaky, illegible hand. Eleanor Vance's death was ruled a tragedy. Her obsession with the Dreadmoor family was seen as the eccentric fixation of an overly imaginative archivist. Her journal, a frantic, incoherent chronicle of her investigation, was dismissed as the ramblings of a sick woman and filed away in the Havenbrook Historical Society's archive, a silent tomb for a silent story. The Dreadmoors' reputation remained untouched, their silence a quirk of a mysterious but respected family. The truth, once again, was buried. Until 1998, a new generation of scholars, using technology Eleanor Vance could never have imagined, began to digitize the Havenbrook archives. A graduate student named Maria Ruiz was tasked with organizing the town's oldest documents. Maria was a skeptic, a woman who believed in facts, not folklore. But when she found Eleanor Vance's journal, her skepticism began to fray. The woman's frantic handwriting, the chilling details of the Dreadmoor family, and the terrifying final entry began to get under her skin. Maria knew this wasn't the work of a sick mind. It was a witness's testimony. Maria began her own investigation, following the paper trail Eleanor had left behind. She found the letter from the town councilman, the hand-drawn map of Havenbrook with the lost cottage, and a disturbing pattern of early deaths in the Dreadmoor family records. What she couldn't find was the original Dreadmoor journal itself. It was the key to the entire mystery, the confession that started it all, and it had vanished from the bank vault years ago. Her search led her to the Dreadmoor Manor itself, now abandoned and left to rot after the last member of the family died in the 1970s. The once grand house stood as a silent testament to its dark past, its windows like empty eyes, its walls holding a century of secrets. Maria knew the truth was hidden somewhere inside. She found a way in. Through an old cellar door, her flashlight beam cutting through the thick, musty darkness. She found the vault, the place where Eleanor Vance had died, now rusted shut. But next to it, tucked into a small, rotted-out niche in the stone, she found what she was looking for. It was a new journal, bound in cheap paper, and filled with a tiny, elegant script. It was a continuation of the Dreadmoor's history, started in the 1960s by the last living member of the family, a man named Jonathan Dreadmoor. Jonathan's journal was a horrifying read. He didn't just write about the silence. He wrote about the curse. He described the visions that haunted his family, phantom whispers, the sound of a baby crying from the past, the recurring nightmare of a dark river washing over their feet. He wrote about his family's constant battle against the urge to confess, a constant psychological war waged in their own minds. He had found Silas's original journal and had been trying to destroy it for years. But he couldn't. The curse wouldn't let him. Jonathan wrote about his grandfather's sickness, a strange, rapid wasting disease that had taken his life. He described his father's melancholy and the strange silence he kept even from himself. He wrote of his last living relative, a boy named Liam, who would stare at a single, empty space on the wall for hours, as if watching a ghost. The curse, it seemed, was a sickness of the mind. And then, in the final entry, Maria found the last warning, written by Jonathan just days before his death. "I am dying. The madness is upon me. But the journal must be saved. I am trying to take it far away from here. But the whispers are getting louder. The curse is trying to take me. I cannot stop it. The truth must die with me." Maria read the words again and again, the flashlight trembling in her hand. She had the journal. She had the truth. She had what Eleanor Vance had died for. But then, as she stood in the silence of the old vault, she heard a sound, a quiet, rhythmic tapping coming from the corner of the room. It was a sound that didn't belong. She followed the sound with her flashlight beam, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw a small box, a wooden box, hidden beneath a pile of old rags. As she reached for it, the tapping stopped. The sound of the tapping was replaced by a different sound, A faint, low whisper. Maria froze, her hand still reaching for the box. The whisper grew louder, more distinct. It sounded like a voice calling her name. She turned, her heart in her throat, and looked into the darkness of the vault. And she saw it. A figure, small and hunched, staring at her from the shadows. It was a child, or what looked like a child, but its face was contorted into a terrifying, silent scream. It wasn't just a hallucination. It was a ghost. A ghost of the past, now present in the now. And it was there because she had finally, after all these years, broken the silence. Maria Ruiz stared into the darkness of the vault. The figure was small and hunched, its mouth a gaping, silent scream. It was a ghost, not a sheet-wearing specter from a campfire story, but a terrifying, solid manifestation of the Dreadmoor curse itself. It didn't move. It just stared, its face a mask of silent anguish. Then, slowly, with a jerk that was both unsettling and unnatural, it raised a trembling hand and pointed at a spot on the floor. Maria's blood ran cold. The silence of the vault was now a living thing, a weight pressing down on her lungs. Her mind, so sharp and logical just moments before, began to unravel. Was this the madness Jonathan Dreadmoor had written about? Was this the truth that had killed Eleanor Vance? She didn't know. And in that moment, she didn't care. She turned and ran. She ran out of the vault, clutching the journal to her chest, through the musty cellar, and out into the crisp October air. She ran until she reached her car, locked the doors, and drove away from Havenbrook as fast as she could. She never went back. She never spoke of the ghost, but she couldn't escape the truth. The Dreadmoor journal, the one she had found in the cellar, became her own personal horror. She spent the next several months translating the tiny, cramped script, her hands shaking as she read each chilling entry. She read Jonathan's pleas to a god he no longer believed in, his accounts of the whispers, and his fear of his own sanity slipping away. She read his terrible conclusion, that the only way to end the curse was for the Dreadmoor line to die out. But the final pages of the journal were missing. Jonathan had torn them out. The last line she could decipher, written in a spidery scrawl, was a final confession. Narrator's voice becomes a whisper. And so I have done what my great-grandfather should have done all those years ago. The truth will die with me. May the curse finally be silent. The final pages were gone. The ultimate fate of the family's progenitor, Silas Dreadmoor, was a secret he had taken to his grave. Did the curse finally consume him? Did he, in a moment of silent madness, take his own life to end the torture? We may never know. What we do know, however, is that the silence did not end with the family. It found a new victim. Maria Ruiz, the skeptical archivist, never fully recovered from her discovery. She never spoke about it, and her life was consumed by a quiet, crippling anxiety. The silence of the Dreadmoors had seeped into her soul, leaving her forever haunted by a truth she could never share. And so, the mystery remains. Did the silence of the Dreadmoor family end with the last descendant? Or is the curse a living thing, a psychological horror that simply waits in the darkness, waiting for another curious mind to speak of a truth that was meant to stay forever sealed? And so, the story of the Dreadmoor silence ends not with a final scream, but with a question. The mystery of the family who never spoke remains a haunting footnote in Havenbrook's history. We can piece together the broken fragments of their story, the stolen child, the terrible crime, the curse passed down from one generation to the next. But the most important part of the story remains a blank page. What happened to Silas Dreadmoor, the patriarch who started it all? Did the curse he created for his own family finally turn on him? Or did he manage to escape the consequences of his crime, a coward's victory that would ensure his family's suffering for generations? The truth is locked in the lost pages of that journal, a secret that may never be told. And what about the silence itself? Was it just a metaphor? A sickness of the mind that withered and died with the last descendant? Or is the curse a living, breathing thing? A psychological poison that waits in the dusty corners of old archives and abandoned houses, ready to latch onto the next curious mind that dares to unearth a truth meant to be forgotten? This is not a story about a ghost haunting a house. This is a story about a secret haunting a family, a town, and a history. It's a testament to the chilling truth that some of the deepest wounds are not made with a knife, but with a single, terrible lie. If this story made your skin crawl, if you find yourself looking over your shoulder, I want to know. Have you heard of a story like this from your own town? A silent secret buried in the past? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to keep digging into the dark, hidden corners of history with me, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We'll be here, waiting, in the silence,